I rattled off about 10 things there because I'm just trying to make the point that Alberta is cooking. There is a lot going on, and I wouldn't mind having you take us through a few of these things. I know you're focused like a laser on a new court ruling and a new bill in the legislature. I promise we'll get to that. But just really quickly, I'd like your thoughts on that MOU, that Memorandum of Understanding, or as both Carney and Smith call it, the Grand Bargain. Do you think there will be a pipeline built to the West Coast?
No.
Okay, message received. Tell me why you think there will not be one.
Well, I mean, under our Constitution, starting in 1867, what's one of the great accomplishments of Canada when you look back at our early history? It's the railway, interprovincial works. Well, how did that happen? It happened because under the Constitution, exclusive jurisdiction, authority, exclusive approval-making power vests in the federal government for interprovincial works, which include highways, pipelines, and so on, as well as ports and matters of coastal waters, exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government. Well, the Prime Minister's made clear, as has his new Minister of Environment, as has other ministers, that this pipeline will only go ahead if British Columbia consents and First Nations consent. Well, under the Constitution, they do not have those entities, BC and the First Nations, do not have a veto, and the Prime Minister's given them one. And that's the word veto does not appear in the MOU, but that doesn't matter because the Prime Minister has to approve the pipeline, and he said he'll only basically do it if BC and the First Nations are on side. So I just think it's, and the timelines are too long. We have an urgent need to grow our economy, to build prosperity, to undo the harmful ways of the federal government. So I don't think, and from what I've been told by oil industry people, there's just not a business case for it. I think the MOU is a very important advancement in some respects, though, in that the Carney government has committed to not move ahead with its emissions cap, which was really an unconstitutional production cap designed to keep Alberta's oil and gas in the ground, which is the greatest generator of wealth in our country. And the net zero electricity regulation, which is making our grids less stable and preventing us from all provinces from capitalizing on the growth of the new market for AI data centers. But I think the Premier, it's an important accomplishment. It is nowhere close to a grand bargain because it doesn't deal with the other core issues of equalization, out of control immigration. It doesn't deal with the reckless spending and the deficits. It doesn't deal with the failure to have a criminal law system or criminal justice system to keep us safe and the other things that are driving the independence movement. So it's a step in the right direction. It has some positive features, but it's not, it's a good thing. I don't dispute that, but I think the error that was made, unfortunately, by the government here was they oversold it.
Now, let me do something I don't think I've ever done. I'm going to play devil's advocate for the Liberal Party.
Awesome.
This is new territory for me, I should tell you. Let me throw a couple things at you and you deal with them. The first is Stephen Guilbeault, the former environment minister, the author of so many bad ideas, quit and made a fuss and quit and did the interview circuit, and other Liberals sort of chimed in. I saw Talib Nur Mohammed from BC, former Liberals too, Jody Wilson-Raybould, Catherine McKenna, the former environment minister. At first I thought, that's just orchestrated to make Westerners think that this was a big deal. I thought that Stephen Guilbeault, because we knew he was thinking of stepping down anyways, but I've heard that this is actually causing a schism in the Liberal Party, that it is turning the Liberals more towards the center than the far left, under which they cruised that way for 10 years. What do you say to the fact that maybe Mark Carney is pulling back from the craziness and and all these ultra left, like Elizabeth May said, "Oh, I regret voting for this government." You can never take a politician at face value, but maybe this is some real reality here that maybe they are open to an oil pipeline. And again, this is me pretending to be a liberal.
Agreed. I was wondering the same thing, that this was some kind of showmanship. But I talked to a number of people that persuaded me that that's not the right assessment. I think Guilbeault and others are livid. And the reason they're livid, and the reason they had their temper tantrum and stomped out of the room, notionally, is because they're eco-evangelists.
Yeah.
And to move away from anything that's not climate alarmism, that's not net zero 100%, is blasphemy. And so the eco-evangelists of Guilbeault must protest. So, but this is where I come to a disturbing conclusion. I believe Carney is well, and his wife are eco-evangelists too. But I think Carney sees himself in a different class where he wants to get to the same goals that Guilbeault had. He just sees a more sophisticated, more nefarious way of getting there, which is through carbon taxes and other tools, things that aren't as obvious. He said openly when he suspended the consumer carbon tax, he said something to the effect that it was too visible, that we need to do these things where the voter can't see them.
Yeah, I think he said it was too divisive.
You don't know why.
Yeah. So the reaction
that's my answer to that one.
Yeah. I remember when he nixed it, it's not that he said he was against it inherently. It just was dividing people. So it was the reaction to it he didn't like. He's still fine with carbon taxes. Let me ask you about the new energy minister, Tim Hodgson. I think he's a bit of a newbie. I can see him making some messaging mistakes. And so let me play devil's advocate for the Liberals. This is not my safe place, Keith. But when he said veto, or you need the consent of the BC, you need the consent of the First Nations, maybe he was speaking imprecisely, because I saw yesterday he was moving back to we need to consult with them. We don't need their consent, which would be a veto. We need to consult, which would be to have, some conversations. So what if we said, well, maybe Tim Hodgson, he's fairly new to politics, maybe he misspoke a little bit there. The MOU doesn't say consent. And I didn't know much about Tim Hodgson. I don't think anyone in politics did, because you know what he came from? He came from Goldman Sachs. I think he was the CEO of Goldman Sachs Canada, which is where, back in the day, Mark Carney came from. These are all Goldman Sachs is known as sort of the Darth Vader of bankers. They got their tentacles everywhere. They're the most nefarious. They're the richest. They're the most powerful. So it's no surprise that that's where Carney reached. But this guy is tight with Carney. No one else in caucus has heard of him. But maybe he actually has some power. And I don't see that he's an eco-radical. I don't know. I mean, in fact, he sort of comes from an energy background. Again, this is me outside of my safe place trying to make the case for the Liberals that maybe this is how Liberals go about making pipelines. I can't believe I'm saying these things, but I want to see your answers to them.
Well, watch. He's often on camera in question period because of the camera angle. Watch it. You will see he always looks like the guy who just was pulled off the street, off of Wellington, and said, "Hey, come sit here for a minute." He's always doing this. Like, what's going on here? He has this dumbfounded look. I don't think he's going to last in politics. He's trying to be a politician. He's a hardcore hedge fund type business guy.
Yeah.
And so I just, is he a sign of hope that the eco-evangelists are losing their grip? No. I think Carney's using him as a device, as a tool to achieve these eco-evangelist goals through a different means, through a more sophisticated sleight of hand technique, through all of this gobbledygook that we hear from Carney. So Hodgson does not give me hope. I see him more symptomatic and as evidence of a more sinister way in which Carney's conducting himself.
All right, I got one last question about this. And again, I think you and I overlap almost completely on issues like this, like the Venn diagram of what you think and what I think. It's like a perfect circle. But I do want to keep open the possibility that I've missed something, that I'm in my own echo chamber. And so I want to test my own beliefs, and I know you do also. You're always testing your own beliefs, improving your understanding of the world, checking your hypothesis. When you think back about the great nation-building projects of this country, and I think the CPR, the Canadian Pacific Railway, is probably the biggest and most important. It really did keep the country together.
Yes.
It dealt with, whether it's a military
facilitated
uprising,
the migration, the settling of the prairies,
yeah,
resource development,
keeping
protected us
BC
from spread of the United States into Canada. Absolutely.
Probably the single most important thing that this country has achieved. That was done by great men, adventurous entrepreneurs and capitalists, yes. But at the end of the day, it had the political muscle behind it of being a government project that was facilitated, legislated, funded, financed, and any problems were like the CPR blasted through the rock, but the government blasted through 19th century red tape as much as there was. And the reason I say that is when the government owns the project, the government gives itself the permits, the government can make something happen for itself, perhaps in a way it wouldn't do for a private sector project. So let me throw this at you. I hate to say it, but the only oil pipeline built in the last 15 years was the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which was done atrociously, poorly, awful by the Trudeau government, which botched the private sector pipeline, bought it, completed it at like 5 times the price. But they actually did complete that Trans Mountain Pipeline. It's actually operating. What if a government, or even the federal government, were a part of a project that was proposed? I don't know if that could happen, but if that happened, I think that would de-risk the political risk here. Because I think that when you have oil companies say, I'd rather operate in Kazakhstan, I'd rather operate in dictatorships than Alberta, that's what they mean. It's the political risk. Do you think there's any prospect of having a government partnership, as much as I hate that, in a new proposed northern pipeline?
Let me say a few things. First of all, if Carney was truly interested in helping reset and redirect the country from the lowest GDP growth, from, you've seen the different charts that show Canada is just in such terrible shape in terms of our economy.
We're poorer than Alabama.
And our economic growth.
We're poorer than Mississippi. Many of our Canadian provinces are poorer
and there are problems, Ezra, that you can appreciate and your listeners will appreciate that are actually hard to fix. And then there's problems that are easy to fix. Some of the stuff that Carney can fix is actually very easy. And let me illustrate that. We have had for a very many decades, we have had a federal statute called the Impact Assessment Act. Okay. But under Trudeau, they brought in Bill C-69, which added all kinds of provisions to that statute. He could simply remove them, right? Because then it will just operate like it did before they screwed it up. Right? It's not like this has to be complicated. And in fact, the courts have struck down many of the provisions of C-69 as unconstitutional quite properly. So he has a very simple remedy. He could instruct the justice drafters to go back to the version that existed before, which facilitated growth in projects of all kinds across this country, investment, job creation, economic development. It's that easy. Just restore it to the act that was before. It would literally take 5 minutes. Just bring up the version that existed before B69. He hasn't done it. He hasn't moved a wheel on that. But what he did do is he created this special office that he controls, where if you get yourself on a special list, 5 or 6 projects can go ahead. We need 5,000 projects to go ahead of all sizes to create jobs. We need the people who are fleeing with their investment dollars to come back. And he hasn't done that. He's chosen not to. I could give other examples. So I don't think he is any different than Trudeau, other than he's much more sophisticated and maniacal. I think he sees himself as an eco-evangelist, but he's going to do it in a more discreet way and cause the masses to see the greatness. And I think he wants to demonstrate to the rest of the world, other countries in Europe, that he's going to show them how you can implement green policies and save the planet. And unfortunately, we're all going to be the victims of that failure. But you used the example of the TMX pipeline when it was originally proposed as a private sector project. And I was involved in representing some of the landowners along the route and involved in some of the hearing processes. So I'm very familiar with it right down to a technical level. And I still remember the day when the company announced they were pulling out. They were at about $7 billion for their budget and estimate at that time. And then the government had to step in and save face and took it over. Well, what did they end up spending? Was it $30 billion?
Yeah, crazy.
So the problem is now, well, it's not full. And Hodgson and others say, well, it's not full. Well, the reason it's not full, imagine what the toll would be, the charge for you and I to run a barrel of oil through that pipeline if it costs $7 billion to build versus how much the company running the pipeline is going to charge us to run a barrel of oil through it when it costs $30 billion. The tolls are so high, it's like they're off the scale. So the estimates are that if the government were to build the new Northern Gateway pipeline, a new pipeline from Alberta to the coast, that it would cost $50 billion.
Oh my
well,
God.
No oil company is going to be able to afford to put the dill bit in it, especially when they got to transport the diluent back after it's stripped out in the Asian market. So the economics aren't there. Yeah, they could build it, but they're going to build a pipeline that no one oil company can afford to put oil through, especially when on top of that, they're going to have to spend $5 or $10 a barrel on carbon taxes.